All right, so today we're going to talk about axles, brakes, and tires. How many people have a towable RV, one that you pull, a fifth wheel travel trailer, pop up? Okay. Any motorhomes at all? Perfect. All right, so I'm going to start off, I'm going to talk about the axles and the brakes, and then I'll bring Ben in to talk about the tires. He actually, before he was with us, he was with Raven Tires, so he knows way more about those than I do, so I'll leave that to the professional.
Just a few more things.
Just a few more things.
Just a few more things.
All right, so first thing we'll talk about are the main components in your axles and your brake system. The first thing will be the axle on your trailer. You may have 1, 2, or 3 of them. The most common type is the leaf spring axle. Most of you probably have those. There's not a whole lot of maintenance to be done on the axle itself. There are some spring type axles on higher end fifth wheels where the spring attaches to the frame on the hangers. They actually have what are called wet bolts that have a grease fitting on them. If you have that type of axle hanger, then that needs to be greased, according to the manufacturer's directions. I think it's every year or so on those. All axles are going to have what's called a camber to them. If you look under your trailer and you see that your axle has a slight curve to it, that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with your axle or that your axle's bent. The manufacturer of those axles actually makes those axles with that camber on them so that when your trailer's loaded, the tires and everything are aligned properly. It's for load. Now we have seen, and same thing with leaf springs. There are leaf springs that have a bend down. There are some leaf springs that are straight. There are even some that go the opposite direction. And those are all perfectly normal. Whatever the design was that they put on your trailer, they put on there for a reason. You can damage those springs by dropping a wheel off of the road at speed or hitting a curb real hard while you're going down the road. And if you end up with one spring that looks different from the others, that's lost its bend, definitely get that in and let us look at it, because that can happen. It's not real common for a spring to fail, but they do.
Got a question on that. So on my front axle, on the left side, I've got one tire that's wearing way more than the rest on the inside. Would that be leaf spring or axle?
His question was, he's got one tire on his trailer that's wearing differently than the others, like on the inside. Could be an axle thing. By bringing it in and having the guys take a look at it and see if something's off. So the axles are pretty simple. The next part of your components would be the brakes, and those are very important. So we'll talk a little bit about the different parts of your brake system. Yeah, go ahead.
Question on the axle. How much flexibility do they have back in the end?
Yeah, they'll tweak quite a bit turning, and
If you've ever seen me driving around a fork truck or whatnot, they will actually bend if you get them into a tight corner. That is normal. There is no issues with it.
Okay.
right, yeah, they'll spring.
How much could it go to snap or?
Not something that we see very often at all. I mean, I don't know that I've ever seen one snap from that. Have you, Chris?
I've never seen one right now.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we move them with fork trucks, so we can turn them literally on their axles, and they'll flex, but they pop right back to normal. They're built with that flexibility into
I notice that
them.
a lot when I'm backing mine into my driveway.
Right.
That's pretty sharp.
Yeah, that's normal. It's not going to hurt anything.
All you gotta do is pull it straight ahead or back it up a little bit further, and they'll true themselves right back up.
Right.
You do have to be careful whenever you are having them at an angle and you unhook them. They are going to be tough to unhook and or slide off a little bit. So you always want to make sure that the tires are straight.
Right. All right. So on your brakes, this is a typical brake assembly for a trailer. Most trailers have a drum brake just like this. There are a few fifth wheels out there that have a disc brake system, but I don't think anybody in here right now has that. These are the most common. So the main components are the drum itself, which is the outside part. take this apart here and I'll show you. So this is your brake drum. So this is the part of the system that the brake shoes push against to stop your trailer when you apply the brakes. It's important for these to be round and true, and over time they can develop grooves or
An unevenness.
unevenness that can cause problems with the braking. So these are something that always need to be looked at when you're checking your brakes. Inside, you'll have 2 brake shoes on each brake, and then you can see the lining on these. The main thing with the linings is you want to make sure that they're not worn down to any rivets that hold the lining onto the pad or onto the shoe. These are the connection between your brakes and this brake drum. With cars, motorhomes, most of them, gas motorhomes anyway, they'll use a hydraulic system for their brakes. So you have a hydraulic cylinder that actuates the brakes on big motorhomes or big trucks, and maybe an air system. On trailers, especially travel trailers and fifth wheels, they're actually magnetic. They're electric brakes. And what that means is down here, this is a big electromagnet, and when your brake control puts power to that, it creates a magnetic field which pulls the assembly out and pulls the brake shoes out to contact the drum. Kind of magical. I mean, I never would have thought that a magnet would have enough power to stop a trailer, but it does. And those can wear out over time, or, so a good brake inspection will check the operation of the magnets, and you do that with applying the brakes, making sure the wheels stop, the breakaway switch. And then you also have down here an adjuster that will adjust the brakes. Brake adjustment is something that we see neglected on a lot of trailers. And if you go over time with your trailer and you notice you keep having to turn your brake control up further and further and further for these brakes to feel like they're stopping the trailer, it's probably because they're not adjusted properly. Even brakes that have an automatic adjustment on them can get dirty with brake dust and gunk from the roads and not adjust properly. So very important thing to check is the adjustment on your brakes. And if you notice that brake control keeps having to go up further and further and further, that's probably the issue, is the adjustment. So the brakes will need to be cleaned, the adjustment done, and there's an access hole behind that allows you to get a brake spoon in there to adjust the brake pads. The other big component in here is going to be your bearings. And you typically have 2 bearings on each assembly. You have an inner bearing that rides on the inside of the hub, and you have an outer bearing that rides on the inside. I'm not sure what I did with it. It's this one here. Yep. Some of the brake assemblies will have a grease fitting. Some of the hub assemblies will have a grease fitting on them that you can access by popping a little rubber cap off. These are good for maintaining your grease inside. A couple of squirts of the grease gun's great, but you can't overdo it in some of these and actually blow out the seal and fill up the inside of your brake assembly with grease, and then they don't work real well.
Then your brakes will not work at all.
Correct. It is recommended that you properly repack the bearings once a year. And a proper repack isn't just sticking the grease gun on there and squirting some grease through. The manufacturers recommend taking the hub assembly off, having the bearings pulled out, clean them off, repack them real good with grease, and put everything back. Not doing that can cause some major issues with bearings.
I've got a few up there that the races on them are very chewed up from lack of maintenance.
Yeah, these all have big grooves in the bearings, and a lot of that can be avoided just once a year, taking it apart, greasing the bearings, put everything back. the main function of the grease gun fittings is to keep the grease full and to keep that pressure in there that keeps water and gunk and stuff like that out. Don't substitute that for actually greasing the bearings properly. It does occasionally happen where a bearing will fail from never being repacked and the grease drying out. And worst case scenario on that, the whole bearing assembly can come apart and the hub can come off. I mean, just like on a car. So you want to make sure that those bearings are properly maintained. Bearings are pretty cheap. A bearing repack doesn't cost a whole lot compared to the trouble of having a bearing go out on the road or something happen to your axle. So once a year, have those bearings repacked, and it's a good time at the same time to visualize your brakes, make sure that your pads are okay, make sure everything's adjusted right. So it's something that can be done all at the same time. So the bearings, that's very, very important. One of the other components of the system is going to be a breakaway switch on your trailer. On your fifth wheel or your travel trailer, you're going to have a breakaway switch.
Make sure you put that on.
Yes.
For you.
Yeah, I'm not going to shoot the brakes
Okay.
off. The breakaway switch is basically an emergency brake for your trailer.
That's that little wire you hook up.
I meant to grab one of those and bring it out here, and I forgot.
I got a question on your tub assembly.
Yep.
The nut that he's putting on now, is there a foot-pound torque
There's-
back, or is it just
It is there's a small foot pound, and then you want to back it off per the manufacturer of the trailer or axle.
How do you find that information from the manufacturer for your?
It'll be online through the Dexter. Most of the time, it's Dexter axle, and I'll give you the spec on it.
Yes.
Bear with me, I'm totally new, okay? And I'm going to have a brake controller put on my Silverado. Okay, does that work with the vehicle's brake? I mean, when I step on the vehicle brake, does that engage the trailer brake?
Yes. In fact, I'll go ahead and skip ahead to the brake control.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. We'll talk about that for a second because that's a good question.
Okay.
Yeah, your brake control is the connection between your vehicle and the brake system on the trailer. There are basically three different types of brake controls, three main kinds. You have a time delay style brake control, which is the most common. Most of them look like this. It's the type that we've installed for years. When you hit the brakes on your vehicle, it spools up the power to the brakes. So basically, you hit the brakes and it starts to apply the brakes on the trailer up to a set level, and you adjust that manually on here.
Okay.
Probably one of the most common types. Thank you, sir. The second type is a proportional brake control. A lot of original equipment manufacturer brake controls are proportional, like Dodge, Chevy, Ford. Thank you. And those actually work in conjunction with the brake pedal on the vehicle to a point where if you barely apply the brakes, it barely applies the brakes on the trailer. The harder you push on the brake pedal, the harder it applies the brakes on the trailer. So a lot of those original equipment brake controls that are built into the trucks are really, really good in that respect, that they are sensitive to the amount of pedal that you're giving the brakes, where the time delay ones are not. When the brake lights come on in the vehicle, that's when it applies it, same amount whether you're standing on it or not. There is kind of a middle ground with brake controls, inertial style. They use some type of sensor, either a pendulum or an accelerometer inside the brake box that senses the amount of deceleration of your vehicle and applies the brakes in the trailer proportionally to that. Those work really well in that respect. Some of the older style with the pendulum inside, if you get on I'm sure you've all been on a concrete highway where your trailer kind of starts to do this a little bit because of the cracks in the pavement, that type of brake control can actually sense that motion and think that you're applying the brakes and then start applying the brakes back and forth on the trailer. So they all have their good and bad. The time delay ones tend to be the most trouble-free, the easiest to use, because you're just setting that number, you know, you said, oh, normally, you know, number 4.5 on mine works well, and, you know, I just need to adjust it up and down a little bit. So, yeah, so those are the 3 types of brake controls.
The one with the time delay will actually also time out. And after you have your foot on the brake for X amount of time, it'll actually go to that 4.5 or 5 that you've got set and be maxed out. So if you're slowly coming to a stop and you're taking your time and all of a sudden your brakes get a little harder, that's why. There's no issue with the brake controller or trailer. It's working properly. That's with that time delay. It just gives you, I don't know, 15, 20 seconds to stop. If you're not taking your time, it will stop a little bit quicker.
So that comes to, you know, like the setting a brake control like this, and even the ones on your, you know, built-in ones, you want it to be a seamless feeling of the trailer and the truck stopping at the same time. You don't want your brake control set so high that when you hit your brakes, you feel the trailer dragging you back. And the same thing, you don't want to set it so low that you're smashing the brakes on the truck and it just feels like you're not stopping. So it's all about balance, and you have to, you know, you may have to experiment with the settings on it a little bit to find the right level where when you hit the brakes, it feels nice and smooth. It doesn't feel like either one's pushing or pulling the other. So that just comes with a little bit of experimentation. And if it's a brand new trailer, you know, and the only time it's been on the road was getting from the factory to here, you know, the brakes may not be totally broken in yet either. So there may be some adjustments that happen over the first few trips that you may notice you have to turn the brake control up a little bit or down a little bit as those brakes start to seep into the drum. With the brakes, the manufacturers, normally like Dexter and those, recommend that every 6 months that you check the brakes for operation and for uneven wear. The easiest way to check for operation of your brakes, you know, besides stopping the trailer, but even then you don't know if you have 4 wheels, if all 4 are stopping or not, is to jack up each wheel. You know, you can either pull your brake away, apply the brakes, and make sure that that brake is actually stopping that wheel. You know, you can try spinning around and then stop it. Mentioned the yearly repack of bearings. The breakaway switch is a very important part of the braking system on your trailer. And it's basically just a switch that when the trailer, if it comes disconnected from the vehicle out on the road, this is just a switch that locks up the brakes. Now, there's a very important part of this system that needs to be working for this to work, and that's the battery on your trailer. So that's why it's always important to make sure that your battery is charged up and good before you leave. If your battery's dead, when you go to hook up your trailer, and you think, oh, well, you know, I've got it plugged into my truck, it'll charge up on the way there. It will, but if something were to happen and this breakaway were to break loose and that battery's not charged up all the way, your brakes will not lock up on the trailer. So always make sure your battery's charged up and good before you leave on your trip, so that if the worst were to happen and the trailer becomes separated from the vehicle and it pulls your breakaway, that it'll actually do its job. Another thing to mention about the breakaway is that it's not a parking brake for your trailer. We do see that every now and then where, since it locks up the brakes, people will get to the campground or get home and say, well, if I pull this out, it locks my brakes up on my trailer. So that's a good thing, I need to do that, right? Well, no, because what'll happen is the amount of power that it takes to lock these brakes up and keep them locked for a long time will cook the magnet inside, make the brakes not work properly. It could even melt the wires on the switch. So it's not a parking brake. It's not something to be used when you get home just to let the trailer sit. So
I've
emergency
even
only.
seen the switches go bad also.
Yeah. So it's a good idea to check these every now and then too. You know, pull this out and make sure those brakes lock up. Before we move away from the axles and the brakes and move to tires, which is his forte, are there any questions on the axles and brakes? Go ahead.
Okay, I know this isn't with the axles and brakes, but it does have to do with the braking and breakaway. Do fifth wheels require chains?
A fifth wheel itself does not require chains, no. If you have a regular fifth wheel hitch, it does not require chains, and any of them that attach in a fifth wheel style. So if you have, like, even if it's a gooseneck, but it has you have the adapter that goes from the ball to another ball, like the tripod type, those don't require them either. I think it's only true gooseneck style attachments where it's a gooseneck ball all the way down to the truck bed that require the chains. And that's only in some states. But yeah, fifth wheel itself does not. That's why you don't see, like with semi trucks, with their attachments, they don't have safety chains. Fifth wheels don't require them. Any other questions? All right, we'll go ahead and move on to tires then. So we'll turn it over to Ben, who's the expert on that.
All right. Everybody knows tires. Black, round, hole in the middle. Tires come on your trailer. They're really needed to be aired up properly. There is a way to air them up through a valve stem. These do actually go bad every once in a while. They get dry rotted. They'll have little cracks in them. On your tire, when they wear, you'll actually see sometimes they'll wear on the outer side, or they will wear on the inside. Most of the time that is due to air pressure. Sorry, first time, this is not much to say. They also have a DOT. That DOT tells you where they're made and the year and week they were made in. They also show you how old those tires are. With that being said, about every 3 to 4 years, we see tires nowadays that are blowing and will make huge, sometimes holes in your camper. I've seen some that go 4 years. I've seen some that'll go 6 to 7. They are pretty bad spots in your camper. This is actually what they do over time. They will dry out and make little cracks inside of your tread here and all throughout the inside. Can everybody see the little spot there? This is what happens after they've cracked. They make a pretty big size hole inside. When you start seeing wires, I would highly recommend getting them off of there. They should have been off of there a little bit ago.
So how do we avoid this happening to us?
Always maintain and check your tires and watching them, seeing how they look, make sure they are free and clear and you don't have any issues. If you've seen some semi-drivers, they'll take a bat and kind of hit them, make sure the air pressure is right. They also have the TPMS sensors that you can put on the stem and to check your air pressure as you're going down the road. And with that being said, a lot of times whenever you are driving, and it's cold outside like today, and you're driving, when you set your air pressure to 60 or 80 PSI, as you're driving down the road, it will warm up, meaning the temperature in the tire will go up along with the PSI. every 10 degrees, it will go up 1 psi. So if your tire's cold at 80 psi and 30 degrees, and you're driving down the road and it's, well, 80 degrees on that tire, it's gonna increase psi quite a bit. And it is normal for it to go up a little bit. You will see rise and fall in temperatures. If you've noticed with old mornings on your cars, if you've got the little sticker, the little emblem that's got a tire, it normally comes on this time of year. It's just telling you you've got low tire pressure. Any questions? Yes.
What should high PSI be?
Which,
So,
I'll answer that because most of your trailers, most all of them now since probably the last 10 years, we can look over at this trailer. Every one of your trailers will have your VIN sticker, and then they'll have this sticker right here, which has all your tire pressures and how much pounds that you're going to tow. This right here has the 225, 75 R15 tire, and it's supposed to be set at 80 psi cold. That's before it's even moved. That's even in the summertime. The typical cold is the unit's not traveled or moved anywhere. That's what they call a cold tire pressure. So this trailer right here is the maximum we want to start with. It's 80 psi. All the trailers will have this yellow type label that'll have the tire on it, and it usually will define how much air pressure, even though this may say that it's more, you want to go with what the manufacturer recommends for this load weight for this trailer.
yeah, you always want to go with what the manufacturer specs are on the trailer, not the tire. A lot of times the tire can be a lot higher.
what I'm looking at is I've got a tire monitor,
Yep.
and I'll put 80 PSI cold, and after I go down the road for a while, I'll go up to 90 PSI, and my tire monitor will be going off like crazy.
Yes.
What should my high PSI be?
I wouldn't let it go over 10 pounds. On my personal trailer, because some of the manufacturers, they just build things where you're already at a limit. Mine's a single axle trailer. So my trailer was able to be 4,200 something pounds loaded. Well, my tires, which your tires indicate the weight bearing load that tire will carry. The tires that came on the trailer wasn't really made to that standard of the 4,200. It was only like the 36. So I changed my tires to the Goodyear Endurance, better constructed tire, and they can haul more weight. It says the max pressure on the tire is 65. Well, my trailer is only for 55. Okay? So the only thing that I did to complement what you're seeing when you pull yours, I set my tire at 60. And then I see it rise about 4 or 5 degrees when I'm towing, and it keeps it right at that 65 for the max for the tire. But I increased mine because the tire didn't really actually cover the weight that my trailer would carry, being a single axle trailer. So if you're seeing that kind of a climb, I just back it off 5 psi and tow it and see what happens. But you really shouldn't go over 10 or 12 because the heat will dissipate through the tire and immediately just makes the inside of it fail. We see blowouts because the heat increases the pressure and so forth. So you might start with just when you air them up, even though this does say what it says, if you're getting that kind of increase, it's because of the load that's on the trailer, therefore the load is flexing the tire, the heat is growing inside the tire. So just do it about less than 5 pounds to it and see what happens. You're within a realm of, like, if you're within 8 to 10 pounds, you're not going to see a tire failure from low tire pressure unless you're getting 15 to 20 pounds. Then the sidewall's flexing so much you can get a failure that way as well.
Is that what these are then 2-axle trailers?
Yes.
In this ring?
Yes, most of them are. But, again, because of the size of the trailer and the size of the tire, this varies with how much PSI that it tells you to put in. Any other questions? Like I said, if your trailer is 10 years old or newer, it will have this information because the federal government got involved with making sure people knew what to actually put in them. Because it was a guessing game years and years and years. You kind of wanted to go with what the tire was. Well, again, like I explained, a tire, it's stamped on the tire how much weight bearing it can hold. And back when it was bi-spline, it was a guessing game. But now that they've got this, it is a good guideline to go through. But at your point, I would just go ahead and 75 PSI, hold, and then tow it and see what happens. But you want to keep it within that realm of not having too much heat on there.
Yes.
Most people might show them where they find PSI on the tire.
On the tire, it will show you everything from the name, the brand. A lot of times they'll have the PSI in the small little lettering right around the wheel here. That's also where you'll find the DOT code. It'll give you the size, the ply rating, and how much that tire can actually hold. I'm trying to find the pressure here.
Sometimes it's pretty small.
Yeah, it is definitely pretty small to find on this one. Right there. Very small letter, 60 PSI. So that's the max that it can have is 60 PSI in this tire. Different ply ratings go for different or bigger trailers. A lot of your Goodyear Endurances are 10 ply, and that's what they build. You can also put on a heavier ply on your trailer. That doesn't mean that you can add more PSI to it. You still want to go with the recommended pressure on the trailer.
You guys replace tires here?
Yes, we do. We can do everything from repacking your bearings, doing the brakes, tires, making sure everything's properly aligned, setting air pressure.
What ply tires should you use? What's the difference between 10 and 12?
So what ply tires you should use comes from, again, the manufacturer specs. It tells you what you should have on your trailer. Whether that be 8 ply, which is also load range D, load range E, it goes by A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And as you go, A is 2, B is 4, C is 6, 8 is D, E is 10. The higher you go, the more ply rating you have and the more weight you can hold.
Ply basically is how much weight.
Yes, ply rating is how much weight you can hold, but that doesn't mean that you can put a huge G-rated tire on your 17-foot trailer and expect to hold that much weight. Your axles are still not rated for that amount of weight. Because you also have to think about your axle weight and your tire weight combined.
Also noted on the sticker.
That is also noted on the sticker. What is it? Your GVW,
Yeah, gross vehicle weight.
gross vehicle weight.
Yeah.
That
That would be loaded.
That would be loaded completely. You can also find the axle rating on the axle printed itself. You can also find it on the tire. It'll say it right there. Show you how much. Like this 8-ply tire can hold a maximum of 2,200 pounds for a dual axle at 65 PSI.
That's the tire per axle.
That is per tire.
Per tire.
If you've got dual axles on that. If you've got a single, that's 2540. 2540 per side, so to speak. Any questions? Yes.
So our tires had, they were hydrogen filled and manufactured. How important is it to keep that hydrogen in the tire?
So when they put nitrogen in tires, that is mostly to help with the tire and air pressure. You can take it out or put air or add air to it, or also add nitrogen. We don't add nitrogen here. It is super expensive to install it inside of your tires. So I've always recommended air. They do come from the factory with nitrogen, but mostly the nitrogen is to help with air pressure of the fluctuation. And it's a little bit lighter, if I'm almost thinking, it's a little bit lighter on the
It doesn't
tire.
have the liquid particulates in it like air. So it's like a compressed air, but it's compressed with a different liquid formula. They use nitrogen for your soft drink machine. So, Matt and I did a lot of research on this several years ago because we thought about investing in a nitrogen machine here to air up the tires. But the expense of it, if you were a full-time person on the road all the time, it would probably be worth the expense to go to nitrogen, okay? But being that most stuff gets pulled 12, maybe 15 times a year, the expense of it over the period of time, air's just as efficient.
I mean, as long as you're checking your air pressure
Yeah.
every time that you go camping, you're not going to have the issue of that. Now, nitrogen will give you the expense of maybe not this time checking your air pressure, but maybe next time.
It's
There's not the
nitrogen, another way to explain, nitrogen is not subjected to so much heat and cold loss. It maintains itself for a longer period of time than like this time of year, you go out in your car, your tire's low because it's gotten cold, or summertime, the heat, so you don't have to add as much air, It does
not fluctuate as much as normal oxygen would. Nitrogen doesn't do that very well.
Does anything to do with guaranteeing or eliminating any kind of dry rot? Because a lot of their compressors are going to have a lot of moisture inside them.
Right.
Moisture inside the tires.
Right. No, it doesn't have any better or worse on wear or as the tire gets older. It doesn't, because it's air, it's still air. It's cleaner air, so to speak.
Yeah, the biggest difference, the easiest way to describe the nitrogen thing is the size of the molecule. So in normal room air, you have a smaller percentage of nitrogen in the air than you've got oxygen and argon and a bunch of other things. Well, out of all of the components of room air, nitrogen has the largest molecule. So one of the reasons why nitrogen holds its pressure better and doesn't bleed off, you don't have to add it as often, is because it's a larger molecule itself. So the loss through the sidewall of a tire or moving from the higher pressure of the tire to the outside air, it's a larger molecule, so there's not as much of a chance of it moving out as it is for like a very small oxygen molecule. They're easier to permeate through just the structure of the tire. So yeah, great big molecule is harder to come out. But like Ben said, if you're gonna want to check your tire pressures before each trip anyway, whether it's nitrogen or regular air. As long as you do that, the benefits really aren't there for the expense of putting the nitrogen in your tire.
There is a few places that actually do nitrogen in tires.
Hang on. I got a question. There's a valve stand.
Yep.
Do you have a brass and steel valve stand?
So they make different valve stems, yes. They make a full rubber valve stem. This one actually has half brass in it. It's a rubber and brass. With the rubber being down here and still exposed to the outside, it will go out quicker. They do make metal stems that will completely go inside and outside. There's a tiny little piece of rubber that's on the inside. You don't see that. That is what blocks the air from coming out. Metal valve stems are great. They will work a lot better and can hold more pressure. Yep.
80 PSI, 60.
Yep. With the metal valve stem, you can hold up to, I think it's 120. If you've got this one, as you can see here, it is half brass and half rubber. They hold up to about 80. Is the max that you can put inside of them. Now, I don't recommend, if you've got this, like this tire, you know, whatever the trailer says, if it says 60, add 60. But you do want that little extra comfort to have that stem in there if anything were to happen.
Okay, if you got a tire monitor, would the tire monitor be better on the brass versus the steel? Well, what I'm trying to get at is, will the steel corrode your tire monitor?
So as long as with the tire monitors and the different type of metals, you always want to make sure that there's no corrosion inside of the stem or inside of the monitor. You always want to make sure they're clean before you put them on and or take them off. You can use a little bit of type of lubricant. Don't throw 30 weight oil on them though. There's a certain type of anti-seize that you want to put on. That way they don't get corroded and get stuck and or break off. I have seen that too. Any questions?
One more, do you balance tires?
I do not balance tires here. I can if you really want me to. With the tires on a trailer, the only reason why you balance a tire is for that little shimmy you have in the steering wheel. On a straight line tire, you're not going to feel that in your steering wheel or inside the vehicle. The reason why I don't is because you're not going to feel any vibrations going down the road from a tire wear on your trailer inside your vehicle. It does not have anything to do with wear on your tire. They will not wear unevenly because of an unbalanced tire. Yes, sir.
So this is our first year in a camper, and so we winterized and cleared away for the year, and I rotated the tires in the truck. Noticed the back tires were cut. So we're pulling that trailer, should we add more pressure to help balance the weight of the camper on the bump, or is that?
Well, with that being said, they will, you just want to have what the recommended is on the trailer for the tires. I wouldn't add any more or less. A lot of times when where's it wearing at? In the center? On the center? Rear tires of the truck? Okay, well it's pushing, that trailer's pushing down on that truck and it's wearing the inside of that. I do if you would recommend airing up the tires in your truck a little bit. That'll keep that wear evenly on the tires on the truck. Yeah. If you do have a heavy trailer on the truck, it will actually push in the center tread of that tire, and it'll start wearing on that inside and not as much on the outside.
We can also look at the weight distribution here to make sure it's got the adjustment in it that it needs to make sure that it's got some of the weight off the truck.
It's the weight distribution will also help with that also. Any questions? Yes.
I should ask this question. I've seen in some of the magazines where you got a kit between the axles that's supposed to take a lot of the bounce out of your trailer and stuff. Do those worth a while?
Putting like,
Well, it shows, it's in some of the camping magazines, they make a kit that goes,
in between the axles and the frame.
I think you take part of what's there out and that's a different design or something.
Yeah, there's a couple of manufacturers that make those. You know, I've been here for 20 years. I've only put 2 on.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you would ever notice anything with it, with the towing part of it. And I don't know if the 2 we put on, I haven't had anybody tell me it helped with any kind of wear or anything.
And back there, I got a 5th wheel. Every once in a while, I get on a spot where that thing starts to riding, bouncing a lot, you know, and I've almost come to the conclusion that I'm on bad pavement.
Well, I mean,
You know what I'm
in
saying?
reality, the axles, most of these axles are a little wider than the axle on your tow vehicle.
Yeah.
So with that being said, the crown in some of the roads, you're on the edge of that crown, so you're gonna get some wag and you will get some bounce because of the width of where it's riding with some of these roads today,
Yeah.
where the big trucks have ran and pushed down on the road. It gets I see it more in mine as a single axle trailer, so we went to Lexington last week and there's a place on a 2-lane road where I come out of Lexington where big trucks coming in and out of a plant, and it was just, even though I got sway and weight distribution, it was just pushing the trailer around until I got on a better road. So,
Well, I even noticed at one place on New Blacktop, so I thought maybe they, you know, their process, maybe they got that down. You know, I've kind of paid attention to it.
sure.
Try to figure out what caused it, you know, and it don't do it, like I said, just once in a while.
What helps on that is the airbags on the truck.
Airbags on the truck will help.
Yeah. Well, I know they make different kits on
Yes,
your
they do.
5th wheel box, you know, it's supposed to.
They make like you can get the air ride pin box. There's so many things out there that they offer, but like I said, the air ride pin box lets you've got a big 5th wheel with a lot of weight, and you've got a single axle truck instead of a dually truck. I've seen where the air ride pin box will help with some of the chunking. But like I said, the 2 that we put on the axles, I haven't had anybody say, yes, it was great, no, it didn't work, so.
Well, I've had about 10 years now with 2 different 5th wheels, and I've just about come to the conclusion what little problems I have, I can't justify the expense. You know?
Right, and the reality of it is, it's not like an automobile. So you've got all the weight on this trailer centralized on these 2 axles that's in the center. So to dissipate some of the chucking and some of the bouncing and so forth, it's hard to get that relieved because that's where all the weight's being the load bearing on the road and on the trailer itself.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, Ben, I've had to air up my tires in the middle of the road, because I've had some issues. What kind of air compressors do people carry? I'd like to find out, you know, I don't want a big bulky one, I want something compact. I know I've talked to you about
Yeah.
this. If you
So I've got, in my personal truck, I've got a little jump pack air compressor. I think it goes up to 60 PSI. A lot of the bigger ones that go up to 80 or 100 PSI will be a little bit bigger. but mine's just a deal that sits right beside or behind my seat. It'll air tires up to 60. It'll jump start a vehicle. There's a light on it. You get them at many different places. And if you wanted to use a bigger item, such as an air compressor, you can use that inside your truck or put it in the bed of your truck. But with that also comes weight and loss of room.
I know what you're talking about, goes up to 60. I've got one of those. But
Yeah.
I bought a larger 2-gallon one, because my trailer goes up to 8.
Yeah. This, like I said, it's a bigger air compressor. It'll work, but the only issue is it like a little bit of room lost in the bed of the truck. But you can buy a small air compressor. The only issue is having power to hook up and use it. Like I said, mine's just a little battery containment, and you just hit the button and turn it on, and it goes to that pressure you want. Any other questions? No? Chad, do you have anything we'd like to add?
I don't think so.
I would say, we'll go ahead
Several videos online you can watch. But this
and
is
close it out.
general.
Everybody's still got